Good morning. This week, House Democrats continue our focus on delivering results for the people. As we indicated, leading up to the midterm election last year, were we to seize the majority, we'd be focused primarily on lowering health care costs and protecting people with pre-existing conditions. There's no more significant issue facing the Congress than the exploding costs of health care and a continuing Republican assault. In fact, the Republican assault on health care is unacceptable, un-American, and unconscionable because it impacts more than 100 million Americans. There are millions of Americans who have faced down cancer. That's a pre-existing condition. There are millions of Americans struggling with diabetes. That's a pre-existing condition. There are millions of Americans who are fighting heart disease, at risk at any moment of having to confront a stroke or a heart attack. That is a pre-existing condition. That's why the stakes are incredibly high. And we stand to protect those Americans. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle and the administration are trying to take away that protection. And so we're so pleased that the Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Frank Pallone and the leadership of Annie Kuster are bringing a bill to the floor this week to protect those very vulnerable Americans. Every single person in this room has a family member with a pre-existing condition. Every single member under the Capitol Dome, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, has a family member with a pre-existing condition. Every single person in this country has a family member with a pre-existing condition. The issue is deadly serious. And so we're thankful for the incredible leadership of Annie Kuster. And let me now yield to the distinguished, gentle lady from the great state of New Hampshire.
Thank you very much, Hakeem. And I think you said it very well. When you think about it, asthma, allergies, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, just go through the alphabet. Having a child, Catherine and I, pre-existing condition, any of these things, in my state of New Hampshire, the opioid epidemic, pre-existing condition, alcoholism, pre-existing condition. And every week we've heard Republicans in the House Energy and Commerce Committee talk about, oh, of course we want to protect pre-existing conditions. And yet what is this administration doing? They're in court right now to eliminate the protections in the Affordable Care Act. And what they've done at every step is to sabotage the consumer protection guide rails that were in the Affordable Care Act. And most notably through these Section 332 waivers, they are making the decision to allow states to offer junk health plans that don't protect consumers. And let me just give you an example. In the original Affordable Care Act, there were 3-month short-term limited duration plans just to help somebody get into another plan when they were changing employment. What this administration is doing is extending that to 1 year and then 3 renewals. So for 4 years, you can end up in a plan that does not have the protections, does not distinguish a person with a pre-existing condition and give them that protection, requires that women pay more for their health insurance. And the worst stories that we heard in our committee were people who went to the hospital and didn't realize until after the procedure, after the treatment, that their health care was being denied. And then when they took it up with the health insurance company, and they said, we didn't know about the pre-existing condition, the health insurance company said you should have known. And it's unconscionable, it's un-American, and we intend to close this loophole. And more importantly, we intend to get our colleagues on the record. Do you care about the quality of life of the American people? And the fact is they do not care. They're in court right now to eliminate the entire Affordable Care Act, and we intend to call them on it. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There we go. Again, we appreciate your leadership, Annie. Thank you for bringing this bill to the floor. And once again, putting American families front and center, which we will be doing in another bill that we're going to be taking up this week, the disaster relief package that is going to be addressing the hurricanes that struck the South, the wildfires on the West Coast, the flooding in the Midwest. And since it's been nearly 2 years since Hurricane Maria, the deadliest natural disaster in the U.S. in 100 years when it struck Puerto Rico, there were approximately 3,000 deaths, tens of billions of dollars in damage. And with this bill, we are again saying to the Senate and to our Republican colleagues, you need to help Americans as they face these natural disasters. This supplement will put $17.2 billion towards natural disaster relief, $3 billion towards the flooding in the Midwest and tornadoes in the South, $1.5 billion for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and $1 billion for the Community Development Block Grant to help expedite rebuilding of housing and small businesses, and $500 million for the Department of Agriculture's Emergency Conservation Program, so important to our farmers across the country. These vital funds are going to help Americans rebuild their lives and their communities. And we call on Republicans to come to their senses. As my colleagues have just said, it is well past time to put the American people and their needs first in the work we are doing here in Congress. Over and over again, we've seen Republicans cave to this president's demands and holding up relief for all disasters because of this president's particular contempt of Puerto Rico. We need a full faith effort to bring these communities from despair back to vibrancy, and there's no time to waste. And there's no time to waste on all the other bills that are piling up at the Senate door as Mitch McConnell describes himself as the Grim Reaper. And one particular bill that we want to highlight here today are actually two bills that address gun violence that would help close the Charleston loophole and have universal background checks for guns. Jason Crow tweeted this morning that our kids are on the front line of violence as his congressional district experienced yesterday their third mass shooting down at a charter school in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. That is building on the horrors that unfolded in a movie theater in Aurora. And one of the major school shootings to this day, that at Columbine. Our kids on the front line. Mitch McConnell has the keys to the Senate door and to making sure that we are addressing these issues. This is about working for the American people and not forgetting that that is his job, that is his oath of office, and opening the door to the issues that we are working on, the For the People agenda that puts the issues of American families back on the front burner here in Congress. It is long since time that we get to work addressing these issues. We hope it will come with a recognition that pre-existing conditions, as the chairman said, affect every single family. And we'll take this legislation and those that we have passed previously, from anti-gun violence bills to equal pay for equal work, net neutrality, climate change, and have those votes in the Senate and move this agenda forward. With that, I yield back to the chairman.
instance, the Department of Justice has sent a letter to Chairman Nadler informing them that the president has asserted executive privilege over all of the subpoenaed materials from the Mueller investigation. What's your immediate reaction to that, and do you see this as just another legal challenge, or is this a real challenge for the caucus?
Well, there is no basis in law or in fact for the Stonewaller in chief to exert executive privilege. The Mueller investigation has already run its course. Bob Mueller and his investigators have spoken to countless individuals, including the former White House counsel. And so to try to assert executive privilege after the fact is laughable, it's frivolous, and it has no basis in reality.
Mr. Chairman, there's been a lot of chatter from members of the Judiciary Committee about maybe using Congress's power of inherent contempt to actually, force this on their own like they used to. Is that going to be a problem? I mean, in the old days they used to take people and lock them up in the crypt here. I mean, would you guys be for that if criminal contempt and civil contempt seem to be dead ends based on recent historical precedents? Your members are talking about inherent contempt. Would you think the caucus would be willing to go down that road when you guys are trying to talk about health care and other bread and butter issues?
We haven't had that discussion. Right now, the Judiciary Committee is considering the contempt citation. That will be voted out of the Judiciary Committee. Thereafter, the Rules Committee and the leadership, in partnership with Jerry Nadler, will discuss the next steps in terms of how to proceed. In the interim, we will continue to focus on the kitchen table pocketbook issues of importance to the American people, this week led by Representative Annie Kuster. Sorry, sir.
You and the leadership have advocated sort of a cautious approach toward impeachment, gathering all the facts, having hearings, etc. It seems like that strategy has blown up because you can't get the facts because the president won't give them to you. So what is your next step?
Well, the strategy has not blown up. The next step is the contempt proceeding that is taking place before the House Judiciary Committee today. The standard that has been articulated by Speaker Pelosi remains clear. The evidence should be compelling, the case overwhelming, and impeachment should be bipartisan in nature in terms of public sentiment. So we are still in the fact-gathering process. The administration is engaged in incredible stonewalling. But we are not going to give up. We're going to keep moving forward. We believe that the law is on our side, and we'll continue to utilize that law as we proceed.
But how long can you wait? Can you just wait for this to move through the courts? It could take months on end.
Well, we expect, particularly when there's a conflict between the legislative branch and the executive branch, that there will be expedited consideration by the Article III federal court system.
Yeah,
Want to speak?
I just wanted to add that the obstruction that we are seeing from this administration is not just limited to the facts around the Mueller report and that investigation. Where are our answers around the family separation policy? That is just one example of how this administration does not want the focus to be on the issues that Democrats are working on every single day. They know that if they are talking about how they are, addressing healthcare in this country, to Annie Kuster's point, the president is proceeding with a lawsuit to take away healthcare from Americans. We don't know what the immigration policy is and where the money that we have already authorized is being spent. The obstruction of this particular administration and its enablers in my Republican colleagues goes well beyond just the Mueller report and really to these core issues that face American families at home.
I think what you'll see is the American people recognize this pattern, and the more that the White House continues to obstruct, continues to deny transparency for a report, as the chair said, that executive privilege, it's the horse is out of the barn. These people testified to the Mueller investigation. How can you call executive privilege now? They've already spoken. And so as the third branch, we have every right to have these oversight hearings. But I just want to make one comment. In a sense, the president is self-impeaching. And that's the process that's happening in front of the American people. And what we intend to do is to get to the truth. And it's no different with the pre-existing conditions. They get up in front of the American people and Republicans say, of course we want to protect pre-existing conditions. But at the same time, this administration goes to court to eliminate the entire Affordable Care Act. And tomorrow you will see Republicans voting against my bill to protect Americans with pre-existing conditions. It's all part of a pattern.
Mr. Chairman, given everything that's going on in terms of the president's tax returns, do you think Democrats should skip the subpoena and take Treasury to court over that? And do you think what was reported in the Times yesterday over his past returns bolster your case for that?
The President of the United States is a wannabe dictator with authoritarian tendencies. That perspective is inconsistent with our constitutional fabric. The House is a separate and co-equal branch of government. We don't work for Donald Trump. We work for the American people. We have a constitutional obligation to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch and to proceed with our oversight functions. The president is not above the law. The so-called Attorney General is not above the law. The Treasury Secretary is not above the law. And so we are going to proceed consistent with our constitutional responsibilities. But step one today relates to the Judiciary Committee proceeding on contempt.
Assuming that does pass out of the Judiciary Committee today, and it sounds like a full vote by the full House would be next, do you have a sense of when that would come, and are you confident that you have enough support among the Democratic caucus to pass it?
I'm confident that the entirety of the Democratic caucus understands that we are heading into a constitutional crisis and that the values that are at stake relate to our ability to serve the interests of the American people in a way that's consistent with the Founding Fathers' vision of a democratic republic, of separate and co-equal branches of government, of the balance of power. Those are the stakes right now, and I'm confident that all 235 voting members of the House Democratic Caucus are unified in that regard. Last question.
When you want the focus to be on these issues, they were very powerful in 2018. You start your press conference with them, but all the focus is on the investigations, on the contempt vote. You talk about constitutional crisis, self-impeachment, and stonewalling. Doesn't all of that draw this out for a long time, and do you put yourself at the risk by not going to impeachment where you have more robust tools of A, leaving those tools on the floor, and B, disappointing the Democratic base?
We've been very clear in terms of the standard as it relates to impeachment. And again, the next steps are to make sure we can secure the information on behalf of the American people. We want the full unredacted version of the Mueller report. We want the underlying documentation. That information has been subpoenaed. The subpoena has been violated by the Attorney General. That is why he will be held in contempt of Congress. We also want to make sure that Bob Mueller is able to tell his full story to the American people. Our job is simply to make sure that the facts are understood in the context of our oversight responsibilities. At the same time, we will continue to legislate aggressively on all of the issues that Annie and Catherine fully laid out. And we're confident because the very same people who were focused on portraying everything that was going on in Washington over the previous 2 years as all about Russian collusion created the impression, you would think, amongst insiders that that's all we cared about. When we were actually out talking to the American people about lower health care costs, increased pay for everyday Americans with a real infrastructure plan, and cleaning up corruption and bringing our democracy to life as we've attempted to do through H.R. 1. And in November of 2018, Democrats won a historic midterm election and netted 40 seats. So we remain confident that we will be able to communicate on the ground, at home, in the manner that we've done over the last 2 years in a way that will be effective. Thank you.